Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel AC SAP Consulting. It has been a while I have posted videos on YouTube. There are a lot of things going on, but now I am back with an entire series of videos on profitability analysis. So this time I thought of doing something new which will benefit both you as well as me. I'm going to post an entire series of videos on profitability analysis for everyone free on my channel. I'm not going to post this on Udemy or post this on any other paid memberships, but this is free for everyone. In return, I will ask you to have a minimum number of likes so that I can post the next video in the series. So let us go into the videos. This is the very first video on the profitability analysis, and this covers introduction to profitability analysis. This is a very short video, and in the subsequent videos, we are going to see in detail both theory as well as the hands-on part on profitability analysis in S4HANA 2021. So let us jump into the video. So what is profitability analysis? Profitability analysis, or what we call as COPA, is a subcomponent of S4HANA which is used for internal reporting and decision making. Now, what is internal reporting? In every organization, we require external reporting, which means the legal reporting that the business or an organization is legally supposed to be submitted to the government. And internally, there is another reporting which is used by the management for decision makings on how to run the business profitably. So this is external reporting and internal reporting. And as we are saying, profitability analysis is used for internal reporting and decision making by the management, which will help them to drive the business in a better way. So profitability analysis collects data from all other modules. It will gather information from FI, MM, SD, everywhere. And whenever a document is posted into finance, something called as profitability segment captures various details in the form of characteristics and value fields. And this data is moved to the COPA module where we can have a multi-dimensional reporting. Do not worry, it might look confusing at this point, but we will understand what is a characteristic, what is the value field, what is a profitability segment, and we will also see what is this multi-dimensional reporting that we will get out of COPA, which is not possible in normal FI module. So first of all, how is the data flowing from different modules to COPA? As we said, whenever a financial document is getting posted, there is something called as a cost object. There are various cost objects like cost centers, profit centers, internal orders, etc. And similarly, there is also another cost object called as a profitability segment. Unlike cost center, profit center, or internal order, which is just a one value, profitability segment is a collection of different values, what we call as characteristics or COPA characteristics. A characteristic can be anything. It can be your company code, it can be a controlling area, it can be the customers, it can be country, it can be the material, anything. A characteristic can be something which is provided by default as a standard by SAP, or we can also define our own characteristics, for example, by creating a continent. A continent is not something that SAP provides by default, but we can write a logic in the system. Again, when I mention as write, there is no coding involved, but we can define a characteristic which will derive continent based on the country which is used in that particular transaction. So like this, there will be different characteristics, and all these characteristics together form one single cost object called as profitability segment. So when a document is posted in the financial accounting, this profitability segment captures various details, and this data is passed on to the controlling COPA module for us to then generate further report. Now, what is this value field? Now that we said a characteristic is something called as a company code or a country or a continent. So these are different fields which are present in SAP which are used in that document. Now, for all of these fields, there should be certain value. For example, what is your total sales value? What is the discount value? How much quantity has been sold? What is the unit of measure? What are the various discounts? What are the various taxes? And we can also play around with these values to arrive at your gross margin, net margin, profit, EBITDA, etc. So all these are called as value fields. In simple, characteristic is nature of field, and value field is a value that is assigned to that characteristic. So now, when we capture all these details in any module and move it on to the COPA module, we are saying that we will get something called as a multi-dimensional reporting. Now, what is this multi-dimensional reporting that we are not able to get in any other module? Now, for example, take an case where you are going to the transaction FBL3N and you are generating a GL report. Now, in this FBL3N, all you will see is against a single general ledger account in company code combination, you are going to see what all different documents have been posted. This is a single directional, or I can tell it as a two-dimensional report. Same way you'll go to FBL5N or FBL1N, any other report. Or you take as your asset history sheet, AR01. All these are single or a two-dimensional reporting where you are comparing two different things. Like for example, against a single GL account, how many transactions are posted? Or against a single transaction, how many line items are posted? But whereas if you go to a profitability analysis, in profitability analysis, I can see a multi-dimensional report like how you see on the screen, the figure, article or material against a particular material, against this particular customer and this country. What are the different transactions posted? And in that, what is the total sales value? What is the total discount value? What is the total tax value? So this kind of values at a multiple dimensions can be derived in COPA. So this is called as a multi-dimensional reporting. Do not worry again if this is confusing. We are going to see in detail practically as well as theoretically in the subsequent videos. Now let us try to understand what are the characteristics in COPA. As we have briefly discussed earlier, a characteristic is nothing but it is something which is going to capture the nature of a field in SAP, which is used in that transaction. So to go by a brief definition of characteristic, characteristics are the master data of COPA module that reveal information about the transactions and the business. For example, see this on the left. On the right, you can see a screenshot of a example characteristic that is derived by SAP, that is given as a standard by SAP. So this is called as a ship to party. Now, whenever I am posting any sales transaction, the sales transaction will have a ship to party, a bill to party, and a sold to party. Now, if I am assigning this characteristic of ship to party into my controlling area or to my operating concern, then whenever a transaction of a sales is posted in that controlling area, and whenever we are assigning this profitability segment to that operating concern, you know that operating concern is assigned to the controlling area and controlling area is assigned to company code. And whenever we are posting anything in that company code, this controlling area will also derive the characteristics that are assigned to this operating concern. Now let us assume that I have assigned this ship to party as a characteristic to that operating concern. And when I'm posting a sales order, the system will capture this ship to party value. That means the customer, which is defined as a ship to party value in that profitability segment. So this is how a profitability segment will be formed. We are not going to define a profitability segment as such as a single master data. Profitability segment is a combination of various characteristics. And what is a characteristic? A characteristic, as we said, is a different master data that is revealing information about this transaction. For example, in this case, it is a ship to party. Now, the most important and the critical part is what value or what field should be defined as a characteristic in operating concern. So defining a right characteristic is most important because we are going to generate all the reportings based on this characteristic only. Now, once we define a characteristic, for that we are going to assign a value field, and all our internal reporting or management decision is now dependent on the characteristics which are captured when posting this document. So it is of utmost importance to define a right characteristic that is going to tell the actual nature of the transaction or the business, which is helpful or needed for the management to take a right decision as a part of their management reporting. For example, let us take a watch manufacturing business. Now, a watch manufacturing business is using SAP, and we have implemented SAP and operating concern has been created. Now, we need to assign different characteristics to this operating concern, which will help the management to understand the profitability at different levels. So, what could be a possible characteristics? Now, the basic characteristics, there are something called as a fixed characteristics and a user-defined characteristics. Fixed characteristics are the characteristics which are provided as a standard by SAP. Like for example, company code, controlling area, customer, ship to party, bill to party. All these are the standard characteristics which are provided. Though it is not necessary that we will be using all the standard characteristics or all the fixed characteristics in our operating concern, but we can choose any out of, but we can choose any fixed characteristic or all the fixed characteristics that we feel are needed for our business for a proper decision making. Now, let us assume we have added company code, controlling area, all these things. Now, in addition to that, something important, like, it tells what is a division. For example, the division is defining a brand. So we need to have a division. It will tell you, okay, each brand wise, what is my profitability. Now, further, you're also going to have uh, different characteristic or a custom user defined characteristic, which will tell whether it is a men's watch or a woman's watch or a kid's watch. Or it is also telling you what type of watch in terms of whether it is a smart watch or analog watch or a digital watch. So all these values are to be captured in any of the field. For example, it can be captured in a division or it can be captured in the form of a segment. If it is possible to define, then we are going to define it in SAP, like in any standard field, like as we said, division or a segment or anything. And if it is something that we cannot define by using any SAP standard field, then we are going to create a user defined characteristic and derive the value for it based on any existing SAP field. For example, now, depending upon the country, let us take there is a fixed characteristic called as a country, and that is one of the characteristics that is assigned to our operating concern. Now we want continent. Continent is not something that is provided by SAP, but I am going to define a custom or a user defined characteristic called as continent. And while I'm deriving the values for this user defined characteristic called as a continent, this will define or derive the value based on the value that is available in the fixed characteristic called as a country. So I can link this continent with any existing fixed characteristic and I can derive the value based on that. I can tell that if it is India or Sri Lanka or China or Pakistan, then it is called as Asia. If it is somewhere in the American, then I'll call it as America. If it is something in Australia or New Zealand, I'm going to call it as Australia. So like that, I can have some logic and I can derive the value for that user defined characteristic. The user defined characteristic can have a value derived based on any other existing fixed characteristics, or it can have a value which is completely fixed. For example, I can always tell that the value of this continent is always India, irrespective of whatever it is always India. So I can also I can also fix a fixed value for the user characteristic. So now if you see here, there are different parameters that are passed in a characteristic. First thing is what is the description of that. This is going to tell what is the description as well as the short text for this one. Under the above dictionary section, here it is defining what is the data element and the domain, which means what is the table and what is the field from which this value is derived, and what is the length of that characteristic value and what type of a value or what type of a value can be passed. Like for example, it is numeric or it is characters or anything. Now, origin will tell us what is the table in which this value is actually stored. For example, the shift to party is stored in a table called as a PA partner, which is a standard table, and the origin field is KUNWE. The further properties is going to tell what is the status of this one, like whether it is active or partially active. We are going to see what is active, what is partially active once we are actually defining the characteristics. And there is another thing called as display, whether it is display is optional or not, that also can be defined. Now, what is a validation? There is also an option to validate the value that is fetched in this profitability segment for this characteristic. We can also have a check table, like for example, only allowed company code. For example, your characteristic is company code. Then we can have a check or a validation where we are going to tell that only defined company codes should be allowed for this value. We cannot pass any random value in this characteristic. Same way, if it is a continent, there is no defined value in the system. I can give some fixed values. Continents should be only as Asia, America, Europe, Australia, or something. So if it is anything other than what I'm defining as these fixed values, then the system is going to throw an error when the profitability segment is being fetched at the time of posting the document. Or if I do not want to have any validation, if I want to leave it as is, whatever the value that the user is passing in this profitability segment characteristic at the time of posting the document, then I'm going to keep it as a no check. So this is about the characteristics in COPA. So in short, characteristics are nothing but a master data that is going to define nature of a transaction. It is In simple terms, any field that is given by default by SAP, or any field which I'm going to define custom based on any existing fields. Now let us go to the value fields. We have earlier discussed for every characteristic, we are going to also fetch a value. For example, if the characteristic is company code. Now for this company code, I want to have what is the total sales value that is posted. So this total sales is called as value fields. Or I'm going to see for a particular material, which is my characteristic, I want to see what is the total quantity of sale that had happened. So this material is my characteristic and the total quantity is my value field. Value field is also a type of master data in COPA. As we define characteristic, we are also going to define what is the value field. But the thing is, value fields are required only for costing based COPA. In the subsequent slide, we are going to see different types of COPA. There is something called as a costing based COPA and there is something called as an account based COPA. We are going to briefly understand the difference between costing based COPA and account based COPA. But remember at this point that value fields are required only if we are using costing based COPA. If you are using account based COPA, then definition of value fields is not required. Why? In that case, how the values are fetched, we are going to see in the subsequent slides. Now, value fields can contain any value. It can be amounts and quantities. As I said, it can be a quantity or it can be a value. Like for example, it can be your total sales, it can be total taxes, it can be a net profit, margins, etc. But what SAP always suggests is that when we are defining a value field, it tells to define as minimum possible value fields. That means do not define value fields for each and every value. If you are trying to depict your top to bottom or any balance sheet or a profit and loss statement. For example, it is starting from your gross sales, and after that or MRP. After that, you're having a discount. After that, you're having gross margin, and after that, you're having taxes, and then you're getting net margin. So instead of defining a value field for each and every item of this, SAP recommends to use value fields judicially so that we do not fetch unnecessary values. But having a limited number of value fields, we can add or subtract and arrive at different values in the report. We will understand in detail about this, how to define value fields or how to have minimum number of value fields and all that subsequently. So this is about characteristics and value fields. Now we also mentioned that profitability segment is nothing but it is a group of different characteristics. For example, see this. Whenever you are going to define any transaction, for example, if it is an FI only transaction code like FP 60, 70, 75, you're having something called as a profitability segment button. This profitability segment button, upon clicking, will provide you the different characteristics that are assigned to that operating concern, and you can enter the values for this. It is not mandatory that you enter all the characteristics, but wherever or whatever you feel is required for the transaction, that can be entered. If it is an automated transaction, like for example, billing document VF03, then the system is going to fetch the values for this characteristic automatically. Whatever is available, for example, billing type is available, sales order is available, order item is available, whatever value is available in that transaction, that is going to be fetched. For example, if WBS element is not used in that sales transaction, then the value for this WBS element is going to be blank, or this characteristic is going to be blank, and remaining whatever is available is going to be fetched. Now, do not confuse with the value of the characteristic with the value field. Both are completely different. Value of a characteristic is nothing but, for example, here if you see in this sample screenshot, L201 is the value of this profit center as a characteristic. But value field is different. Value field is, as I said, it can be your sales, it can be the quantity and all. So at this at this profit center level, that means at this characteristic level, L201 characteristic level, I can have different value fields which are going to give me what is the total sales report and everything. So do not get confused between those both. Now, by now you should understand that profitability segment is a combination of characteristics, but this itself, profitability segment in itself is not a master record that is created in COPA. So now those are the different things. Those are the basic fundamental blocks of a COPA reporting. You could have something called as a profitability segment, which is made up of characteristics, and you're also fetching something called as a value fields. And with this combination of characteristics and value fields, we are going to do some multi-dimensional reporting for the decision making purpose. Now, come back to the point of where we discussed there are different types of COPA. One is costing based COPA and one is account based COPA. Now, costing based COPA and account based COPA both are available since the ERP days. Like whenever SAP, the version we used to call it as ERP or ECC, since those days, both account based COPA as well as costing based COPA were used. But in those days, costing based COPA had a lot of advantage for various reasons. It supported various fields or various characteristics which were not possible in account based COPA. And it had some better functionalities in terms of reconciliation or value derivation, etc. So SAP always recommended using costing based COPA in those days. But now coming to S4 HANA, SAP did not improve costing based COPA in any way. Whatever the functionality that was there in ECC, the same functionality of costing based COPA is now as it is available in S4 HANA. There is no improvement. And SAP had also declared that it is not going to invest anymore in further enhancing costing based COPA. SAP is now completely focusing on account based COPA and it is recommending everyone to use account based COPA. Now, what is the primary difference between costing based and account based COPA and why SAP is recommending using account based COPA in S4 HANA? We are going to understand. So, costing based COPA is something where the values are fetched via value fields. For example, if you are posting a sales transaction, in this sales transaction, you are having different characteristics like customer, material, sales organization, sales order type, billing document type, etc. Now, against all these characteristics, you need to have different values. Obviously, when we are trying to fetch values, we obviously always want to see what is my total profit, my profit margins and all. So, in order to arrive at profit margins, I need MRP or GSV, discounts, taxes, etc. So, all these are value fields. If I am using costing based COPA, I need to define various value fields which will fetch the values from the sales document condition type. For example, I want something called as an MRP. In my billing document or my sales document, under the conditions for a particular item, there is a condition type called as MRP. That MRP is having certain value. And there is another condition type called as a discount or margin. Another condition type called as uh, GSV or NSV, and some discounts, taxes. It is completely coming at an NSV, or net sale value or a gross sale value, whatever. So for each and every value, we're having different condition types. So we need to define different value fields in order to fetch those condition type values. That is how costing based COPA works. The system cannot identify the value as such directly. We need to inform or direct the system on how to fetch a value for a particular characteristic or a particular amount or a particular quantity. We need to link it. Do not worry, we will see in detail in the subsequent videos. But understand that costing based COPA is not something that is linked with the GL accounts. It cannot fetch the values directly from the GL account. We need to create something called as a value fields and link it with the condition types or anything which can give the values. So that is why the setup of costing based COPA or configuration of costing based COPA is a bit more complex compared to account based COPA. And costing based COPA is fundamentally working on something called as the cost of sales accounting method, which means we cannot structure the cost in period accounting because it is cost of sales account. Now, coming to the account based COPA, we already discussed that SAP is investing further and further to improve account based COPA. So, it is obviously recommending to use account based COPA. But why it is investing in account based COPA? Because, as the name says, account based COPA is directly linked with the GL account or cost element. And you already know that in S4 HANA, cost elements and GL accounts are same. We define cost elements in FS00 only, unlike in ECC where we used to have K01, define a cost element and then link it with the GL account. It is not the case in S4 HANA. We define both GL account and cost element in the same transaction code FS00, and there only we are going to select whether it is a primary cost element or a secondary cost element. Now, account based COPA is something which is linked with this cost elements or GL accounts. What is the advantage of this? The advantage is account based COPA can directly fetch the values from the GL accounts. Now, let us take the same example of a sales order where I'm posting a billing document and it is having various condition types. For example, MRP, discount, taxes, GSV, NSV, net profit, whatever it is. Now, for each and every condition type, you also know that there is something called as an account key for which a GL account is assigned. Unlike in cost of sales accounting or costing based COPA, where I need to create a value field, link it with that condition type to fetch the value, in account based COPA, I'm not going to do anything like that. All I'm going to do is account based COPA, just configure the characteristic and system will take care of the values automatically. System is going to go to that GL account where I'm going to define as a primary cost element for which profitability segment is mandatory in the field status group. And from there, the system is going to fetch the value that is posted for that transaction onto that GL account. So that is very easy. The configuration for account based COPA is very easy. And obviously, in S4HANA, the primary advantage is of the AC docket table where everything is in a single table. So because the GL accounts are also now a part of AC docket table, that means the cost elements and the transactions are also part of that table. The COPA or the account based COPA is in real time integrated and reconciled with FI. So that is the primary advantage of account based COPA. And whatever the drawbacks were there in the previous ECC versions or ERP versions, where account based COPA did not support few characteristics or few values, all that are also now being brought into S4 HANA in account based COPA. So also S4 HANA or SAP is renaming this account based COPA called as a margin analysis. So going forward, this is called as margin analysis instead of account based COPA. So this is a basic difference between a costing based COPA and an account based COPA. So this is what we are targeting to understand in this video, a basic difference of or basic introduction to COPA and what are the different types of COPA and a brief introduction into all of this. So we understood what is COPA, why do we need COPA, what is internal reporting, how COPA works based on profitability segments, and what is a profitability segment, and is a combination of characteristics. And in addition to that, we also require values. If it is costing based COPA, then we define value fields. If it is account based COPA, the values are derived from the GL account. So this is the also we have discussed about the difference between costing based COPA and account based COPA. So in the next video, we are going to see practically in the system, how are we going to define a operating concern? How are we going to set up an operating concern, characteristics, value fields? How are we going to select whether we want costing based COPA or account based COPA? Or is it also possible to have both costing based COPA and account based COPA simultaneously? So all that we're going to see in the system. But for me to post the subsequent video, I would request you to get me at least 100 likes for this video. I think that is justified. So see you in the next video. Until then, take care.